Welcome to this session. We hope that we will provide a little bit of thought-provoking entertainment. You're allowed to fully enjoy and laugh your way through this session. I'll introduce us and then I'll share a little bit about what we're going to chat through shortly. And we very much want this session to be interactive. So hopefully, just to double check, you're all in the right room, first of all. What we're going to be talking about is why well-being matters to leaders and why leaders matter to well-being. Even when I wrote this, it took me a few minutes to get my head around it, so I'll just keep repeating it until it absorbs in. So why well-being matters to leaders and why leaders matter to well-being. So that wasn't the right button. I'm Rachael. I'm founder of Yoke consultancy. We're a wellbeing consultancy, and we've been working in London and now globally for about 3 years. Simon is my colleague, our leadership guru. And this is Jonathan, who is... Yoke has a number of partners, of which one of our key strategic partners is Penguin. Does anyone own a Penguin book? Yes, good. Everybody knows and has heard of Penguin. No one's heard of Yoke, so it's very exciting to work alongside them. But we effectively have a partnership because we want to bring employees the best quality content around well-being, and that's how Penguin help us. And we do that in a strategic way because we bring a bit of strategy thought to it, or try. We were also hoping to have CBI, one of our clients, here today. Very sadly, Milia can't be with us due to unforeseen circumstances. So we're going to play, these two are going to dress up at various different stages and play Milia for the session. And we have got some notes, and we'll probably be accidentally prodding each other at various points, going, this is when you say this. So we'll bring Milia's ideas to life. And Milia has kindly said that she'll do a little summary video that we'll send out to you all via email as well. So, shall we get going? We love to set boundaries at these things. I'm feeling like I need to stand in front of the podium. It's a bit too easy to stand behind it. So a couple of things we don't want to be slightly condescending to you guys. We're going to assume you know what well-being means. We talk about two aspects of well-being. Personal well-being, i.e. my own mental health, my own financial health, all of those sorts of things. But we also talk about organizational well-being. So how does personal well-being impact performance, risk, culture, diversity, etc., and vice versa. And we look at it from that more holistic model. We're also hoping that you all know what leadership means. We're all leaders. We're not saying it's a title, especially as something that Simon will come on to later. We quite like Oshroy's model of top, middle, and bottom. Has anyone heard of that? We very much believe that everyone can be a leader when we talk about leadership. We've also noticed, especially as an external kind of I don't like the word consultancy, it sounds so strange. It's probably because I'm ex-Accenture though, so I'm trying to kind of move away from that personality. What we've noticed in this space is that there's quite a lot of parent-child behaviours going on. So whether that be an employer telling employees what they should be doing, or an external expert coming in and trying to tell you that we know your business better. Today we'd love to have a very adult conversation about this. We're all just trying to figure it out together, so hopefully we can be on a level playing field. Inevitably, there is an opportunity for people to share personal stuff, including the three of us, and we'd like to do that in a confidential space. I think most importantly is probably that we want you to enjoy it. So please feel free to interrupt, hands up, shout at us, whatever it is. And the second thing is obviously we'd love your attention. So we've already talked about the title of the session, why well-being matters to leaders and why leaders matter to well-being. It's a really short session. All three of us love to talk. So we're going to try and just cut the session in half, focusing on the first part of it, the first 15 minutes, second part, the second 15, and then open up for questions. There will be interaction throughout as well. But we're going to frame this in Simon's lovely little formula. Simon, do you want to just share a little bit about this?
Yeah, thank you. Good morning, everybody. How many of you have come across P equals little p minus I? Let me tell you about it. Performance equals potential. Wouldn't that be lovely if that were the case for us individually and organisationally, if that were the case? Minus interference. Interference is anything that you personally find gets in your way. We were talking about buses and trains and tubes this morning. We think about the people who are trying to get in touch with us right this minute by text or email or whatever it may be. Think about the child that's suddenly got a toothache and needs to go to the dentist. It can be absolutely anything. And at an organisational level, you can imagine organisational change, one of the most oft-used words within the organisational lexicon. So that's what it's about. I would refer you to a man called Tim Galway, spelled G-A-L-L-W-E-Y, unusual spelling. He was the writer of The Inner Game of Tennis, that you may have heard of, and The Inner Game of Golf, and a whole series. But I also refer to you to a YouTube, a very grainy YouTube from the 1970s, when he was actually standing with somebody in California on a tennis court. This particular woman had no idea what a tennis court was, had never picked up a tennis racket. She probably wouldn't have even recognized a tennis ball. Within 15 minutes, using, Tim Galway being one of the fathers of coaching, using the ethic that every individual is resourceful and creative and whole, he had this woman playing a game of tennis with him without her even realizing what she was doing, because he never ever told her what to do. And in that short video, it's actually a live chat show from a studio, I think, in New York, just kept on coming back to him, and there she was, hitting the ball across the net, and the next thing she was serving it. But she had no idea. He never actually said, you've got to hit it within these bounds. It just was something that she did. Getting out of the way. If there's one thing that you might take away from today's conference, take this formula and think about, how can I get out of other people's way? Because I could well be the interference as well as it coming at me. Thanks.
So we're just going to have a conversation. Again, please interrupt us, and we're going to go through a couple of prompt questions. I think Jonathan's going to do the first one.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Hiya. So as our first question and first attempt of stepping into Milia's shoes, because I know, Rachel, you were prepping this with her last week. So first of all, does well-being matter to leaders? And if it does, what is stopping leaders understanding why well-being matters to them?
Yeah. Hi, I'm Milia. So Milia runs a wellbeing program at CBI. She's been doing this for about 18 months. I think on most people's agenda, she was quite forward-thinking. When she first started out, it was an individual campaign. How many events? How many lunch and learns? Let's get my benefits providers in. It was quite token and immature, but she was doing a lot. It also was quite challenging from her own perspective because she was organising it all. She started to try and have influence on leaders, but really found that because she was focusing purely on what I shared before around personal well-being, they just weren't getting it. There's sort of a bit of a wall. How can I communicate to my leaders that this is important? They did actually end up working with Yoke, although there are many people that do this sort of thing, and we did an independent well-being cultural assessment for them and provided them with the data that she needed to influence her leaders. That was benchmarking and baselining, but very specifically breaking down a root cause analysis to, if you're going to do something, where would you start? For them, it very much came up around mental health and leadership. So from a personal perspective, mental health was the red flag, and from an organisational perspective, it was leadership. And it was one clean path. She was very easily able to communicate that up, the chain, and also there was only one thing from that. So the budget wasn't necessarily massive that they wanted to do. It's a very, very simple process. I think Millie just wanted to communicate that, and I think the lesson learned from her was she sort of felt slightly strange because she was doing a lot less, but it was having more of an impact. I think the second thing she said she wanted to go on to say is they're getting knocks on the door from all their members at the moment. So much so they had a few in the last 6 months, but in the last 3 months, slightly because I think, has anyone heard of the green paper that's coming out from the government around mental health that was supposed to be last month and may even be October next year now? There was a sort of sense that, okay, is this coming? What are we supposed to be doing about it? And that has forced them to say, right, what is our stance on well-being, and how do we want to start communicating that message out? I think this internal-external balance is something we'll come on to later, but it's a challenge that's coming up for everyone in terms of their authenticity around brand. So I think that answers the question from Milia's perspective.
And I think something that struck me quite recently as well, I don't know if anyone was at the Wellbeing at Work event on Wednesday last week that was up towards Oxford Circus Way. There was a great moment where the MD of Lloyds Bank for the, I think it's the Global Transaction Banking Division, stood up and talked at length about his kind of grassroots campaign and his also kind of senior-led. It's kind of like a fusion of the two, what they're doing there. It was really impressive. And it struck me as really fantastic, and also his kind of own comfort as a leader in perhaps the discomfort of the measurability around all this, and he was just kind of experimenting and figuring out how he went as well along the way. And so I think perhaps what's stopping leaders understanding well-being is, or maybe even going back to your point something about interference, it's almost them getting in their own way and being comfortable with an area that's evolving and developing, and having to measure that as well.
Yeah, so I guess data is useful to a degree, but especially at the conference last week and with most of our clients, none of them measure KPIs around this. It's genuinely coming from a space of it's the right thing to do, which is interesting, because at the start of a wellbeing journey, you have to focus on the data. And once you get that breakthrough, the data becomes less important. So I think the next thing was what we found, which is, I guess, a sad part of the story. I mean, show of hands, do most people work in people teams here? Yeah. Not just in Yoke's client base, but in the sector, we're finding that the pressure, as soon as you open the door of well-being, is overwhelming for people teams to deal with. We've actually got 30% of people that we are in touch with who have had long-term sick themselves because of the sheer volume of work around this in the last 6 months. That's massive. And we also partner with Unum, the benefits provider, the insurance company, and they've seen exactly the same growth, but specifically at the leadership level. So this is something that, although we're trying to all do the right thing, we need to understand what it means for ourselves. I think the question that I'm going to sort of target towards Simon is, from a personal perspective, what's come up for you when you've started to embrace well-being as a leader in your field? And I think the nice question is, what have or haven't you been able to do to get stuff done?
Well, within a corporate context, I think it depends a lot on your context and what it is that you're trying to lead, and to recognise that it's not just about you and the impact that you have in everything that you do as a role model, every single second of every single day, what you do. And then at what point you may, and many people do, really question what it is that you're doing. Maybe you're exhausted by it, maybe you're made ill by it because of the sorts of pressures that we know are around. And what is it that you want to do to take control? One of the things I've noticed, I actually stepped out of big corporate roles about after 25 years, and have spent a lot of time with people who have really struggled to maintain, let alone sustain, their careers in mid-career. I think the issue does come down to being really clear about what it is that you want, and to really answer that question about, how am I able to do my own stuff? How can I create my own boundaries? How can I have enough time to be absolutely good, better than good, excellent, be allowed to be better tomorrow than I was today? And a lot of people are starting to ask that question. I think they've always asked the question. I think they're just perhaps a little bit stronger and louder today, because the link between organisational and individual relationships has actually shifted, as we know, as a result of many, many things in the workplace.
Just to pick up on that from a book publishing perspective, I think books are a very interesting window into the kind of national psyche at any given moment. For example, we've recently been selling absolutely bucket loads of George Orwell's books ever since Donald Trump was elected president of the US. Make of that what you will. But from a kind of well-being and personal development perspective, I think not only is the book market in that area growing every year, it's actually getting more nuanced as well. So I don't know if anyone here has read The Chimp Paradox or is aware of it. So yeah, fantastic book, huge perennial bestseller for us, and actually is amazing because also not only is it fantastically well written, but also the scope of what it covers. I mean, it goes into things like values, mind management, anxiety, resilience, mental health, everything. And what you're seeing now is actually books crop up around in much more nuanced and specific areas of well-being. So, you know, for example, some of our recent bestsellers have been Angela Duckworth's book on grit, which is all about resilience, Ruby Wax's Frazzled on mental health, Dave Allred's The Pressure Principle, which is all about sustainability and performance, Darren Brown's Happy on meaning and purpose. And you've got books like, I'm reading at the moment Robert Webb's book called How Not to Be a Boy, which, I mean, I think if you'd taken that to a publishing meeting even kind of 5 or 6 years ago, just there wouldn't have been a market for it at all. And I think it's brilliant from a commercial perspective, but also brilliant from a kind of general well-being perspective. These books are coming through. So yeah, absolutely, I think that awareness is totally increasing all around the world as well.
So I guess, how do we respond to this? And I think the most interesting question that we were reflecting on is well-being providing an opportunity to shape a new form of leadership. And Simon, I've just realised that you were supposed to be saying this bit. So sorry. I'm just going to touch on two little examples. Two of our clients. One is at a global property company, and what's been really exciting. Does anyone work in property before I say anything too close to the line? I think of legacy, I think of old school, I don't think of diversity, I think of tradition, and these guys are just blowing all of that out of the water, and they've redesigned their leadership values, they call them traits. Well-being is in the top 4, which is amazing. It's a bold statement. I don't know if anyone else has got well-being as a leadership trait that they advertise internally and externally. And what's really critical from our perspective is we take each leader, and every single option on their learning and development journey is a choice, so there's nothing mandatory. And any leader that chooses to come on one of our programs has a minimum of 3 months with us. So this, at the moment, we are celebrating resilience, and the outcome is we'll wire everybody up, we give them an awareness of where they are actually from a resilience perspective, then we run experiments and we do the same. It's a process to help people create a practice. So we don't have feedback forms at the end. We ask people 6 months down the line if they're still practicing resilience, because that's the meaningful thing to them. That's how, as a leader, great, I'm certified, but am I actually going back to my team and being resilient and understanding what that means to me? So this kind of thing really excites us. And I think the other example, not a client yet, but Simon and I went through a tender process with the public sector, with the Cabinet Office. I think that's okay to share. We were supposed to find out 3 days ago, but we assume it's the government, so we might find out for 3 weeks. But they have asked us to pull together a tender where well-being is used as the enabler for change and transformation. The language, we were both just like, is this really happening? We've been asked to do stuff where well-being is an enabler now. So what else is going on? It's not the workshops, it's not the training, the MHFA stuff. People are thinking and stretching how well-being can be a new lens to leadership in the future. Jonathan, I think you want to add a little bit of something on that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, sorry to keep banging on about books, but it's kind of my thing. But the Power of Habit, I don't know if anyone's read that by a great author. Yeah, it's got some nods here. Charles Duhigg, amazing book, totally kind of changed the way, basically made me to start exercising, which was fantastic. But there's a business fable in it. The details escape me, but it's broadly a CEO who goes and takes over like a failing steel company. Do you remember that? Yeah, who goes in there and he's about to have his big kind of first investor meeting, and he goes in there and everyone's expecting like a big grand strategy and everything, and all he talks about for the whole hour is worker safety and everything he's going to do around worker safety, and the thing ends and half the room kind of basically just walk out, and half the room think, okay, we'll give him a year and see what happens. And through doing that, he creates this culture where worker safety is at the heart of everything, that then kind of off the back of it creates all these amazing positive habits that then obviously leads to the profit and the sustainability and the growth. And I think what we're seeing with one of our clients in particular, a company called Boundless, who are down in Brighton, where the CEO has gone in and really kind of turned it around by his own admission, and really put people at the heart of absolutely everything they do, and everything is around worker well-being and people and creating those habits around that, and he credits a lot of their success to that approach as well. So I think it's, to go back to your point, it's really creating and defining leaders in a new way as well.
Yeah, and I think the Boundless gentleman was at the conference last week as well, talking about this, and he also said, I don't mind about the KPIs, and it's really interesting on the data front about how do you use that effectively, and he even has conversations about that to the board. So I'm not prepared. They have 3 simple strategies. One is about creating great teams and great people that are happy to work there, and everything is just measured off that, not peripheral measurements for the sake of it. Conscious of time, because it's actually only about 12 minutes left, or maybe 15. If anyone's interested in any of our frameworks, come up afterwards and we can share those. We just want to go over and flip the question now. So why do leaders matter to well-being? We would love, if we had now a session, to get all of your thoughts on this, but do we really need leaders to gain traction in this space? I think a couple of examples spring to mind. First off, Jonathan, when you mentioned the global head of GTB at Lloyd's is a really interesting one because they have I think it's 70,000 employees. Is that right, Jonathan? About that. So there's an element of we kind of have to do the grassroots approach because there's so many people. So they definitely have this murmuring from beneath, but they also have a very strong leadership, partly because of Antonio's own mental health story. Don't know if anyone saw his piece in the Sunday Times a couple of weeks ago, very much saying well-being needs to be the heart of our strategy. But Simon and I, kind of have this view that in the majority of the clients we've worked with, you do need leadership support. But I guess I'd welcome challenge from you guys if you think that that's not the case, or anyone else in the room.
It definitely is the case, and I'm thinking about specifically one of a number of law firms that we've been working with recently where we have had the opportunity to speak quite confidentially and for quite a long time with partners who are themselves leaders of their practice, of course, but actually most of them don't see themselves as leaders of their practice. They just see themselves as having been there a long time, got to that level and just churning it out, hitting the utilization rates, hitting the targets. And the disconnect, it's almost like a realization in the conversation that they're having with us. And they're doing 90% of the speaking. We're just asking them some trigger questions about how is this sustainable? How is it sustainable for you? What's the sort of feeling of your team? Is it consistent every day? Of course not. It's peaky and it's flowy and it's, we go through troughs. But when we're peaky, how do we rest and recover? How do we make sure we're ready to go on? And at another level, these people are going to be paying my pension when it comes to it. And I'm only 42. Yeah. So there's some really, really big issues around leaders, around traction, and about well-being, and particularly the disconnection that there can be in different contexts. I don't want to pick on that particular sector because we work across sector, and as you heard, outside the UK too, and it's a very consistent story.
And I think the little bit from Milia on this note was that since they have a slightly different structure because they're a membership organisation, since she's had EXCO support, it's almost like her shoulders have dropped and there's an element of this feels sustainable now, whereas before it was very much her pushing and then she'd get distracted by something else and then pushing. So the journey for the employee as well felt very stop-start. So it's sustainable for everybody who's been touched by the programme as well when you have leadership support. So I think the next one, and maybe Jonathan, you can share a little bit about Penguin's stance on this, but it's been interesting from our perspective to observe that people are beginning to, in our view, get it, but we think that we have a very specific view on people and well-being. But they're putting money behind this now. And it's not just internally, it's also companies like Penguin deciding this is the right strategy for them to grow into. So maybe, Jonathan, you could share a bit about.
Yeah, absolutely. My current role at Penguin Living is very much an answer to this question from a Penguin perspective. So it started life as at Penguin Random House we have these consumer-facing brands that kind of collate similar content and books together and then market it to that book community. So we have something called Happy Foodie, which does all the cookery stuff, Dead Good, which does the crime, and then Penguin Living is the newest one, which does all of our well-being and personal development content. So it started off in that life, very much marketing to the book consumer market. However, we kind of quickly realised we had this very unique kind of proposition and access to all these leading world experts that no one else really had. So we started to invest in how we could take those authors into the business space and actually connect employees of businesses to improve their well-being and personal development through access to our authors in a few different ways. And we've done that in partnership with Yoke, which has been absolutely fantastic. And over the last kind of year and a half of our existence, we've seen some really reassuring and exciting results that's making us want to kind of jump into this area even more. And, you know, what we can kind of target around our unique proposition is, you know, we've done global reach. So I think in our time working together, we've done stuff in Japan, US, France. We've invested in the scalability of the access to our authors, so we've developed this online tech Penguin Living portal as well. And going back to Rachel's original point around the adult-to-adult conversation, it's allowing employees to really kind of interact with those authors, whether it's on a kind of a workshop level or access online to promote those adult-to-adult conversations. And that's ultimately the goal for Penguin, you know, beyond this one initiative, is how do we reach new audiences for our authors that are going to be engaged with our authors, and we feel this provides a fantastic opportunity for that, so we're very excited about the future together.
Thanks.
So the second part of this is, what is the trigger to invest? We would put it into two categories. One is that an organisation hits a crisis point, and the most extreme, you can think of the most extreme that might wake people up. But there are other points of slightly lesser extreme, but they're still mighty powerful. You look at your attrition rates, your absence rates, whatever they may be. The other one is that an organisation that has a great brand and is doing some fantastic things actually believes that it wants to do the right thing. Now for that, read, for its people, on a continuing and sustaining basis. And I think those are the two triggers that we see. But Rachel, the other thing that is really interesting to us is, and the example is in the health insurer, is the internal-external dimension.
We work with a large insurance company, and also, I think we share, Stella McCartney. The interesting thing with Stella is they're a vegan brand. So they have this sort of premise of, we do great things for our products. We really respect our supply chain, so why would we not do the same for our people? I think this kind of, and it's the same for this insurance company. We are a health insurer. We want to help you live a good life. And I won't give away their strapline because it will give away who they are. But how do you then take that message? You've given it externally. How do you then take that message back internally? So this almost internal-external brand conflict that I touched on earlier is fascinating. I think with this health insurance company, Simon, the bit that's probably most interesting for us has been that the HR team pushed back and said, we're not going to own this. Customer propositions need to own this. So the whole shaping of well-being for that company is around creating a better customer journey. So at the moment, we're doing a series of experiments with their call center alongside the board. And we're making them challenge themselves as a group, as a system. How can we be more resilient for our customer? It's a fascinating process. What the outcome is being is that they're creating a performance zone, which is online, and a physical space dedicated in their organization, where Yoke come in and deliver stuff to help people stretch themselves so that they can respond better to the customer journey. And that's quite a different story, even to a year ago. We were here a year ago, and the conversations were far more immature. But I think this piece around customer journey is a fascinating one, and then that links the internal and the external brand story really nicely.
And drives you towards being really authentic. Can you imagine going and trying to sell your health insurance when in the press you've got the wrong type of stuff going on? You are in real deep doo-doo. So, you know, this is not an organisation in crisis. This is an organisation recognising that part of its sustainability strategy, looking 10, 20, 30 years down the track, they have to do this, and they have to do it in a consistent way.
Yeah, and I think the only other thing that's shifted for us as well as a company, just being really transparent, is that it was stop-start for us. If we were lucky, sold 6 12-month programs. Now we have conversations with people that say, we want you to be part of our transformation for the next 3-4 years. So, our sustainability, it's just interesting to see how people's minds are now saying, okay, to use this insurance language, they say, well-being is the golden thread to everything we need to do for the future, which is quite interesting. I think the final point, which is never an easy one to end on, and then we'll kind of have 5 minutes of questions, hopefully. What's the future of all of this? So I guess we've all heard of the future of work claims. I think in short summary, it's probably something about nervousness around the 1.8 supposed tenure. How do we attract and retain great talent? And the other one is obviously this sort of alien phenomena called millennials. I'm technically a millennial, I'm 35, so I think I'm able to communicate with you too. But Jonathan, I think you're younger than me anyway. But with that kind of wider future of work context, what's the play of leadership and well-being in this space, do you think, Simon?
Well, there's a few things. I'm sure you are familiar with and think about the emotional contract, sometimes called the psychological contract. That's not the bit of paper that you sign to say, yes, I'll accept this job at this salary with the terms and conditions. This is about, why have I come here? Why do I still want to be here? I didn't come to work for you, and you are now my boss because the previous one's left or been fired or promoted or whatever. The game is changing all the time. We know that. And what can we do about that? But the real issue is the emotional contract being a lasting one, a sustaining one. I actually do want to be here because it's the sort of place that I want to work. We've known forever that the quality of colleagues and the quality of work that I do have been the most critical things, way above pay and way above benefits. But there's another one now, which is this a place that respects me? Is this a place that allows me to perform because it gets out of my way and allows me to? Is it a place that insists on presenteeism, for example? No. Oh, good. So there's that element. A second thing, and I love Gallup. If you're not familiar with Gallup, the pollster, they have done some fantastic work over the last 20-odd years. They used to have just been known as a pollster. Now they have done some really, really interesting work based on big data. And big data tells them that engagement in terms of not just turning up for work, but actually thinking and doing something beyond what it is that I come to do. So it's that sort of, if you like, that motivation to actually be here and do something more meaningful because I want to, is low everywhere in the world. In Britain, it's at 8%. 8% of people in the workforce of 31 million plus are actually engaged to that definition. You'd be pleased to hear that France is at 4%. Germany is only at 11%. No country in Europe is above 17%. And we're way behind Asia, who are in the 20s. So, there are real issues about how we think about the future of leadership. But what do we want from work? What is it that we have to think about in the context of what our work is and what our leadership decisions need to be? We are delighted that one of our clients, and there are others who are pricking up their ears at this thought, have actually created a millennial board. That is, that no single decision that's going to have a big impact on their organisation will just be thrown out from the top, through the middle to the bottom. It's a much more holistic view to take a sounding from the younger generations. We know there are four generations in work. How can we create a more holistic view of this model of leadership that will impact not just the organisations that we run, but also our customers, as you've heard Rachel and I speak, and also the supply chain?
Yeah, and again, I'm conscious of time, so if anyone wants to learn more about the emotional contract and how we set up the Millennial Board at this client that Simon's talking about, we're happy to share. I think that's probably it. What we'll do, I have got 1 minute. Shall I go for it? Resilience. Just wanted to leave you with a parting note on how we see resilience, because it is quite a hot word that everyone's talking about at the moment. Rowan, who can't be with us, who's our resilience expert, loves this analogy of nature and sees endurance and resilience as often misused. He sees endurance as like an oak tree. I'm really, really solid. Generally been around for a while, and I've been doing the same thing for a while. You can hit me with a few lightning strikes, but I'm absolutely fine. And then suddenly one lightning strike will hit me and I'll fall over, because actually I was rotten in the middle. When you're being an oak tree and you're enduring, you're like, yeah, I'm going to push on through, I'm going to get my head down and do this sort of stuff. You're masking a lot. Endurance absolutely is a positive trait and has its place. But resilience is like a bamboo, where you openly say, actually, that flattened me, and that really hurt, but I chose to rewire my response and learn from it and bounce back. I don't even like the back bit, because I think you always bounce to a different place. But flexibility through adversity is resilience. So that's just a nice analogy if you're trying to explain resilience to anyone. That goes down well with all of our clients, so feel free to share with your internal teams. Just as a follow-up, before we go to questions, as I said earlier, we've got a partnership with Unum. We're using their global quantitative data and doing a root cause analysis for their top sort of at-risk clients in the next couple of months, and publishing a white paper on that. It's going to be focused on leaders, because that's where I said before they've seen the worst figures arising. Leaders used to be, in their words, sort of stoic, in the sense that very, very few exceptions where leaders would go off on long-term leave, but they would bounce back within 6 weeks. They're now seeing more and more leaders go off, and after 6 months they're not coming back. There's something going on in this space that we're beginning to dig into. We will share all of that in the new year. We realise that this is in November. If we communicate anything to you until after Christmas, we're not very popular. So we'll share that in the new year. CBI, on Milia's behalf as well, we're kind of working with them on, they're doing some insight around wellbeing, and we'll also share that link in the new year. They're going out to all of their members to sort of say, what does this mean to you? And I think that could be quite interesting. I think that's it from us.